Hello, and we are back. Welcome to the new season of Willis Unscripted. I am your host, Sarah Willis, and we are back in the studio. I have a lot of wonderful topics I want to get into. I have a few redesigns on some set pieces. The board is back down a little lower, and it's a new season, new energy. I am really excited. So I think kind of a fitting episode that I wanted to start off this season with is about motivation, kind of a whole series on that. And our kind of topic today is the value of showing up. So showing up can be very underrated. Often when we think about showing up, it's, maybe the topic of discipline comes up. Maybe it's doing your job responsibilities. Maybe it's studies. Maybe it's fill in the blank, whatever it may be. But showing up is really important. It's not really a sexy topic, but it's one that I have found in so many ways is overlooked and kind of neglected, whether it be academics, in relationships, sports. Just showing up sometimes, that's the first step. And it's not a really flashy step, but it's very, very important nonetheless. So how many of the best things in your life happen simply because you kept, showing up for them, right? You can't get better at a skill unless you show up to practice, for example. You can't get better at school unless you show up to class, or you can't have a deeper and better relationship or marriage, unless you show up for that person and be in, those different things. But sometimes showing up, it gets really boring. I know a lot of athletes don't want to do sometimes the workouts unless it's specific to that sport. Maybe it's basketball or football. Maybe it's jujitsu. I know for me, a lot of people would rather just go roll a whole lot, which is great, and that's wonderful. You need to do that. But you also don't want to neglect the good old bread and butter, meat and potatoes strength training, right? Because that does, carry over. And I think the things that actually end up changing us usually start as routines, not just big moments of motivation. Because honestly, if you're waiting for motivation to get started on whatever skill you want to learn, motivation does this. You have high moments, you have low moments, but rarely you're going to just keep skyrocketing with motivation. It's just life. Things come and go. Seasons come, seasons go, and I may be really gung-ho to learn this skill right now, but what happens when I've got a flat tire and I've got to deal with that? Or what happens, I can't exactly show up to practice if I'm on a flat, something like that. But why showing up works, even though it's not really sexy, and the reason why it works is because skills grow through repetition. Your nervous system is going to be learning not by just doing things, but it's going to learn by doing things, not thinking about doing things. Does that make sense? When you repeat something, your brain is starting to optimize for it. You're forming new neural pathways. You're forming patterns in your mind and your body of how to do a certain skill. If it's athletics, it's a certain maybe movement pattern that if you keep repeating it, as we call it in jujitsu, if you keep drilling a move, you're going to get that kind of muscle memory, right? So showing up and doing the things, it's huge, because sometimes, we forget that the first reps or the first steps or the first tries, they're always awkward. It's not like you're going to jump out the gate being just a virtuoso. Rarely. I'm sure there's somebody. I'm sure someone in the comments will tell me there was somebody who was amazing at some skill right out the gate. But, most of the time, any kind of skill, academics, athletics, relationally, the first, attempts at something are going to be really bad. It gets better over time. And as you are getting better over time, well, confidence is going to build, right? And when you're confident in something, your motivation is going to grow, right? And then it's just going to be bigger and better. Your confidence is going to only grow as you put in the time, as you put in those reps, so to speak, right? Let me put a caveat, legitimate confidence, not the, confidence and maybe being a little delusional confidence. But if you keep doing those repetitions, if you keep showing up, stuff starts to shape, go a little different into the pattern or skill you're wanting to learn. You may just say at the beginning, I'm trying to work out, or I'm learning jujitsu, or I'm trying to write, I'm trying to get closer to God. But as you put that time in, I think it's going to start flipping to I train, I lift, I write, I pray, I invest in my relationships, right? The more time you put into something, the more it becomes a part of your identity, right? And it's just things that you are, by your own nature, want to keep doing. And so you want to keep showing up. But at the beginning, it's always going to be awkward, right? And so just think of it this way. When you have the kind of the progression, right? You've got the skill progression is going to be first show up, then it's the skill, then you have the confidence, then the motivation, then it becomes your identity, and then it just becomes your lifestyle, right? But you got to show up first for it to become who you are, right? You've got to show up. I think there's a lot of stories that I can think to in my life that, indicate this, but, I just want you to take away that you show up and become the person you want to be. It's so often, when I think about people who are beginning a journey, it could be a fitness journey. That's usually the best, example that people can kind of cling to, because I think we've all been there. It's January. I'm sure if you were going to the gym, that's a common New Year's resolution, is to get fit, lose weight, go to the gym every day. It could be something like that, right? But, I think about the jiu-jitsu white belt, day one on the mats. All jiu-jitsu people have been there. I'm not going to say all my listeners and viewers do jiu-jitsu, but many moons ago when I was a white belt, before a lot of injuries, I remember what my white belt, journey was like. And it was a whole lot thrown in your face all at once. And I thought, oh God, I'm never going to get good at this. I'm never going to be, XYZ, with jiu-jitsu. But I wanted to, and so I kept showing up. I was at the gym, at the jiu-jitsu gym, and the gym for that matter, every day, probably twice a day, burning the candle at both ends. But we're not going to talk about that. We're going to just keep pressing on. I was really dedicated because I was, getting something out. I was getting that endorphin, however you say it, rush, right? I was enjoying it. It was really good for my depression. But I do know, I was just looking at some stats. Let me pull them up. So according to a couple of different things I was polling, most white belts quit in the first 3 to 6 months. It's not surprising when I see that kind of stat. 3 to 6 months people will quit jiu-jitsu as a white belt. And then you have the whole blue belt blues thing. We don't have time to get into that. But most people don't quit because they're bad, because we're all bad at the beginning. It's violent, violent yoga. I think that's a good way to think of it. But the real problem is that our egos really hate being beginners and being awkward. And, jiu-jitsu or any kind of sport is really going to confront you with your own helplessness and confusion and just give you a sense of humility fast. It should. But sports psychology calls this the cognitive stage of motor learning. I had to look this up. So it's when your brain is still building the map of what you're trying to do. And so most people will bail here, just because it's due to maybe initial inability, right? I initially could not do certain moves in jiu-jitsu. A lot of us can't. It's very awkward. It doesn't make sense. What is this whole De La Hiva thing? What is this inversion you're talking about? What's this heel hook? What are we talking about here, folks? But most people bail because of the discomfort and that it's not natural movement. It's not something they're instinctively good at, right? But then we start the reps. If you stick around, after 3 to 6 months, those rep phases are going to start beginning. And jiu-jitsu and most all sports for skill are going to be repetition-based, not motivation-based. Because again, motivation, I think, is really tied to emotional, ebbs and flows, not, something that you're going to have to, if you wait for it to come to you, it's going to be, not a very realistic endeavor into trying to build your skills. So, but every rep that you do in a sport or in whatever skill you're wanting. It's going to build movement patterns. It's going to increase your timing ability. It's going to, for jiu-jitsu, better leverage awareness, better pressure sensitivity, so you know where people's weight is going, better spatial understanding, and ultimately it's going to be a lot more confidence for you when you're rolling in any kind of situation. You're getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And so, again, neuroscience, I had to look this up, calls this myelination. I think I'm saying that right. And it's essentially the nervous system literally wraps insulation around pathways so movements become faster and more automatic. This is why, time on the mat is way, way, way more important than just sheer athletic ability. Now, of course, I have rolled with some athletic phenoms. I have to remind them, I am 35. You are an 18-year-old phenom. I can't, look, I like to think I'm young at heart, but there's still just some things I can't do. Youth will beat, and athletic ability will beat it, but still, those repetitions, those skills that you build on the mat, I know any black belt, brown belt who's been doing jiu-jitsu for a long time, our bodies will just kind of naturally move like, okay, they're naturally going to step here. They're naturally, this is going to be what happens now. They're going to probably do this. And at least my body just knows, okay, I'm going to fall into this pattern. I'm going to fall into this without me having to really think about it. Whereas when I was a white belt, I was thinking so much. I was just constantly, and I was always a step behind because I'm trying to think and catch up. But it's really hard to outthink someone who has drilled a movement pattern for nearly a decade, if not more, right? There's just something that's so automatic. And it's really beautiful to watch two people who have had that kind of, long movement pattern training. It's just really beautiful. But new white belts, around year 2 or 3, that's when we're getting into blue belts, right? That same person who was getting crushed now is going to be able to start really sweeping, escaping, passing, setting traps. And so it's a big lesson that I want people to take away with just the jiu-jitsu example is that most people, most of the time, the people who are the most dangerous in jiu-jitsu aren't necessarily the most talented. They're the ones who survive that awkward initial stage and keep showing up. And it's, white belts don't need more talent. I mean, they just need more tolerance for being new and to embrace showing up. They say embrace the suck, and you get better and you build your skills over time. If you want to really improve at something, you need to invest time. And so every black belt, you've ever met is going to be somebody who survived that awkward phase at white belt and just didn't quit. And that's huge. Keep showing up. Don't quit. Keep going unless, and this is general advice, of course, if there's something that's traumatic going on or if there's a legitimate, problem that is endangering yourself or others, yeah, then maybe you need to quit. But what I'm talking about is just keep showing up. Yeah, you may suck today, but tomorrow you may be teaching someone else, just keep going. Don't throw in the towel too early, so to speak. And I think especially when I think about sports or people doing endeavors that they want to go public, those big highlight moments, that's what everyone is going for, right? But nobody really wants to talk about that boring middle of just, beginners get attention because they're new, right? So we're all going to pay attention to them. And, if you're in a good training environment, they're going to want to build you up to keep you coming. And experts obviously will get attention because, well, they're experts and they're impressive and they can do the things. But the middle often gets overlooked. It's like the awkward middle child situation. Yet that's actually right where transformation is really happening, from that beginner to expert. Boring is where most people quit because it's not a whole lot of thrills and a whole lot of excitement. Maybe it's not a whole lot of highlight moments, but by showing up consistently, you're building those skills. So maybe you're building your skills in jiu-jitsu. Maybe you're building your skills in Olympic lifting. Maybe you're building your skills as a better writer, or maybe in creative endeavors. Something that has been suggested to me as a writer, because I love writing on my Substack. I like writing, nonfiction and fiction too, is just set aside a time. You can't wait for creativity to strike. If you want to build your skills as a writer, you have to sit down and give yourself for 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it is, I'm going to write about blank. And then you can come back later, edit, and just kind of see as your skills are going. It's getting those quote unquote hours in so that your skills are growing and that you're going to be better than when you started. You know, kind of forcing yourself that discipline and not waiting for motivation or the muses to grab you and say, write this down, you know, some kind of, you know, mystical process. But, you know, that boring middle where you are kind of dedicated and showing up, that's where most people quit, as I said earlier. But, you know, stubborn. If you're stubborn in that middle period, that's where you're going to grow. And that's what's going to transform you from an awkward beginner to an expert. And, but I know this has been a big thing for me. The tendency, if you have different personality types, I know there's different tendencies, but most blocks or what, you know, most things that keep people from pursuing, you know, that the deepening of a certain skill, I think it really has nothing to do with your innate ability. You know, it's not going to be, you know, something obvious of, well, I'm not a good painter. It could be, but I think a lot of it, at least for me, is perfectionism. You know, if I can't do it perfectly, I'm not even going to do it at all, right? If it's not perfect right out of the gate, I'm not going to do it. I think that's a legitimate fear. I've seen that for myself. I've seen that in students, like in, you know, that I teach in school, that if it's not perfect, like, you know, just shut it down, you know. But the ones who are okay with it not being perfect, they're, you know, there's still some fear. I mean, there's obviously going to be fear of failure, fear of being ridiculed if it's not great. Maybe you're going to be impatient with results. Maybe you're going to play that comparison game, which I know I've talked about, and I know y'all have heard people say that comparison is the thief of joy. That's very true. It could also be boredom. You know, you do the same thing over and over again, you may get bored. But I really do think all those together, that has nothing to do with your innate ability at whatever skill, right? It's psychological. And that's not to say that it's not real, you know, hear me when I say that. But we're kind of, it's that mental block in a way. You know, it's either your own perception of yourself or how you think others will perceive you. And yeah, we're all afraid of getting judged. We're all afraid of getting made fun of, you know. I know if I have, you know, some high schooler wanting to try something new and creative, or maybe a new step out and try something new. High school, middle school can be a very vicious time to where you can get bullied for, you know, trying something new. But I think we carry that into our adult lives too, right? If you're wanting to expand and try and learn a new skill, somebody saying, why are you doing that? Well, that's stupid. Ugh. You know, you're a banker. Why do you need to be a painter? You know, I don't know. But I mean, that's a real fear. I think we still are afraid of, you know, not being accepted by our friends, our circles. But, you know, that's a mental block. That's not a you having a skill or not having a skill. If nothing else, I want to encourage people to try new things and not to quit on them. Give them the full year treatment. Give them a 2-year treatment, and see if it's something that is adding to your life or, you know, and bringing you joy. You don't quit, right? Just keep it up. If there's benefits to it, you know, keep doing it. And it's also to speak to those, you know, out there watching or listening. If you struggle with the perfectionism like I do, set the low barrier of entry. Don't say it's got to be 100 or nothing, right? I love the passion. I love the energy. But realistically, that's way too high of a hurdle to clear, right? You have to embrace the fact that showing up does not mean showing up perfectly. That is not what Sarah Willis is saying. She is saying it means showing up. You know, it could be a very bad try, a very bad attempt, but at least you're trying. At least you're showing up. We need to make sure that when you're starting something and showing up, that you're taking actionable and doable steps, not, you know, trying to eat the whole, you know, porterhouse steak in one bite, right? That's just, whoa, we can't do that. That's not realistic. So maybe you want to read more. Maybe your goal is to read, I don't know how you would do it, but a book a day. Okay, that's really ambitious. Good on you, fam, if you can do that. I'm a slow reader, can't do it. But maybe you want to read 12 books a year. Okay, that's a book a month, okay? Maybe you're saying, well, if I can't read a book a month, I'm going to quit. Well, why don't you just start trying to read 10 minutes a day? 5 minutes a day. Just try to think in minutes and not a whole year time span. Or maybe you want to get closer and be more a part of a faith family. You go maybe to one church service. Just try one and then build off of that. Maybe you want to exercise more. Go on one walk. Or maybe go walking for 10 minutes, right? If you want to have, if you want to learn a skill, maybe go to one class or audit one class or take something online, whatever it may be. The whole thing is you're taking smaller size chunks out of a larger thing, right? You're not trying to bite off more than you can chew. You are taking small, measurable, doable steps that are a lot less intimidating than the whole kit and caboodle. So remind yourself that, you know, the body and your mind rewards repetition more than it rewards perfection. So again, I always tell this if someone's starting any new thing, consistency beats intensity. Okay, if you're trying to build something and change your life and transform something, 80% consistency is better than you tried one time and because you failed, you quit, right? I'll take 80% over 0%, right? I think everybody would. You know, it's just all these things. I just want you to think, just think about those people and those moments in your life too, right? Consistency and showing up for them is just as important. So yes, it's important for learning a skill, but it's also important for growing relationships, right? You know, because when you consistently show up, and it could be in small ways, it doesn't have to be big monumental moments. My friendships that are the deepest and my relationships, you know, my husband being the most important, it's not the big moments. It's the showing up in the everyday little things. It's, you know, it's showing that I value you, I value your time, I value what you value, and I'm going to be here to listen, and if you need something, I'm there for you. But I'm not just showing up when you need something. I'm showing up in the small things. You know, it could be just spending time with someone, just sitting in a room getting a coffee. That's not big, that's not sexy, that's not really impressive, but it's just as important. Those small little moments add up, right? They compound, if you will. And so it's just, when you're there for someone consistently, it's going to build trust between the two of you, right? Because it's showing that you know, you value them. And I mean, relationships, we all know this, relationships deepen, you know, through reliability, you know, and honesty, you know, reliability. And reliability is proven through actions and, you know, and the things that you do, not just the things that you say. You know, I constantly think about just how important it is our actions mean to people. You can say all the right things, but if you don't show up, you know, why would I believe you, right? Why am I going to trust you? I'm not, right? So people believe what you do, not what you say. And I honestly, it should go without saying that if you're not there for someone, they're not going to trust you. If you aren't showing up for someone, they're not going to trust you. And again, doesn't mean you show up perfectly. It means that you do those small things that add up over time, because they believe you when you say, I care about you, because you've been there, right? You've been there with them. You've been there in the highs and the lows. And again, doesn't have to be big dramatic movement. It's just being, in many ways, just being a good person, right? And not being so self-centered. But somehow people don't know that, and they keep thinking, I don't understand. I said that I love them, yet I don't ever do anything with them. And they say that they don't feel like we're friends. Well, yeah, probably, because you're, yeah. But yeah, so just, I'll land this plane. But yeah, just kind of starting the season off with this episode of the value of showing up. You know, don't wait to feel ready to try something, to do the thing that you're wanting to learn or achieve, or whatever goal it is that you're wanting to have, right? Don't be the person who sets the New Year's resolution and then 7 days later, oop, well, throw it out. You know, don't wait to feel ready. Don't wait to feel motivated, you know. And big ways to do that, just lower the barrier of entry, right? Take those small chunks out of the big goal and do those every day, right? Again, could be a 5-minute walk. Maybe it's a 10-minute writing session, or maybe it's, I'm going to go lift and do 1 gym session today, whatever it is, right? And keep the streak going, be consistent. Again, 80% consistency, just, you don't have to be 100% perfect. Just show up. It's better to try and be more consistent than not, than, do the all or nothing mentality. And so don't forget, it's going to be boring in the middle when you go from awkward beginner stage to expert. Yes, there is that awkward middle child phase, if you will, where we don't like to talk about it. But that's where growth happens. And you don't have to be perfect in everything that you do. Just show up for people, show up for yourself, right? There's so much value in that. You don't have to be impressive and have your name in headlights or, sparklers. You just have to be present. There's so much value in being present, because presence accumulates over time, right? And then next thing you know, you look up and you've transformed your life, or you've set goals and you've achieved them. You've learned new skills. Maybe you have bigger and better, not bigger and better, but deeper relationships, meaningful relationships. So yeah, just all that to say, keep showing up. Even sometimes when you don't feel like it, that's when you really need to show up, right? So all that to say, this is the first episode of the new season. I hope that you liked it. New mic, a lot of new stuff, new lights, new camera, actually. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode and you'll keep coming back. I've got some really good guests lined up, especially in February and everything. And so it should be great. And yes, so if you have any questions or comments, things you want me to talk about, drop some comments below. I'll try to get to all of them. But yeah, thanks guys, and can't wait to see you for the next one.